I would love for you to talk a little bit about, maybe we'll say, the original intention of metabolic flexibility, and then how we can also use that principle to induce more cognitive flexibility as well when we're thinking about nutrition.
Sure. Well, the idea of metabolic flexibility is it's pretty simple. It's just it's tapping upon the genetic recipe that we all have to be able to extract energy from whatever fuel source is required for the work being done at the time. So what it means is if you're metabolically flexible, you can extract energy from the fat stored on your body when you're doing low level and even some high level aerobic work. Certainly as you're cruising around all day long throughout the day. If you're metabolically flexible, you can derive energy from the fat on your plate of food, from the glycogen in your muscles when you're doing glycolytic work, when you're in the gym doing heavy lifting or high intensity stuff, from the glucose in your bloodstream, which is what's fueling your brain. At least most people who are glucose dependent throughout the day. So you can burn the glycogen in your muscles. You can burn the glucose in your bloodstream. There's glycogen in your liver. Of course, you can tap into that. You can access the ketones that your liver makes in the absence of glucose. So metabolically flexible, it's the flexibility it's what I call the holy grail. And so it's not about, okay, you must be keto to get there, or you must be doing intermittent fasting to get there, or you must be combination vegan like Mark Hyman would talk about, or I'd rather be vegan or whatever. It almost doesn't matter. There are ways in which you can develop this flexibility so that you become good at burning fat. You become fat adapted, as we say, and keto adapted. You get to the space where your body builds the metabolic machinery to burn fats more efficiently, more effectively. The mitochondria increase in number, their efficiency increases. Now you can become really good at burning fats. When you become that efficient at burning fats, the muscles go, hey, we don't need ketones. I mean, we save that for the brain. And so the brain relies, in the absence of glucose, can now thrive in the presence of ketones. And so you develop this, again, this flexibility, this metabolic flexibility and metabolic efficiency that then translates into more energy all day long, greater resistance to metabolic disease, greater tendency to build or preserve muscle mass, greater tendency to do those, greater ability to put those on. And the number one benefit is your hunger dissipates. Your hunger and appetite and cravings decrease. And so now you have control over your life because you know that in the absence of any sort of upcoming meal, your body's just going to say, yep, I'm going to need 500 calories for the next 6 hours. I'm going to take it off my butt or my thighs or my hips or intramuscularly or whatever, wherever the fat exists. And if I go to the gym and I haven't eaten since last night, which happens to me all the time, I go to the gym and I do heavy leg days fasted. Some people would say that's not wise, but I'm not only able to do it, I feel good doing it, and I feel like it's enhancing that metabolic flexibility because I'm burning fat in the interim when I'm not doing the glycolytic work of the heavy leg day, and yet when I'm doing the glycolytic work of that day, my body doesn't forget how to burn glucose. It doesn't forget how to burn glycogen. That's always there, and so you become this sort of empowered individual who's able to kind of take advantage of all of the benefits that a strong, powerful, healthy human being can provide for oneself if they do the right work.
And I think there's something to say about the joy that can bring back to your life. You'd mentioned, I want my food to taste good, and we don't want to be nitpicking about, like what oil was it? I mean, maybe you want to be concerned about the oil, as you mentioned with the seed oils,
Yeah.
but you can rest assured that your body's going to know what to do, how to assimilate the cells, tissues, glands, organs, whatever, with whatever you're giving it. And, if you travel to Europe, as sometimes we do, and you have a cornetto in the morning with a cappuccino, it's fine if you're doing that here and there, right? Rather than because I say this from sort of experience with my community, in that sometimes and my community tends to be female, and they need to get it right. Everything needs to be right all the time. There's sort of this orthorexic kind of tendency that I notice, particularly in my high achieving women, and they just beat themselves up. They have a croissant and they're,
Yeah.
or they have an extra slice of cheesecake or whatever, and they're off the rails for days. It's
Yeah.
like if you just trusted in, like, just get back,
Well,
like,
and they're not metabolically off the rails. They're just mentally off the rails. It's not,
right.
they violated some code that they set with themselves. Look, I've been there. I know that. But the point of metabolic flexibility is to be able to have that croissant or to be able to have that piece of cheesecake and not have it be a guilt session and not have to go to therapy to deal with the aftermath of it. The metabolic flexibility describes this ability to go in and out of all these different substrates and not be at the effect mentally from having overdosed on sugar when you were keto for the last 8 weeks, and all of a sudden you have a 300-gram carb day. Yeah, that's not that's not the sort of thing I'm espousing. But if you're metabolically flexible, you can have a 200-gram carb day and a 0-gram carb day followed, and one after the other. And if you do this right, and if you become metabolically flexible, which includes doing the high intensity work, doing the occasional intermittent fasting, so you do skip meals, eating sometimes what I would call fractally. So some days eating 2 meals, some days eating no meals, some days eating 3 meals, some days eating 1 meal, some days a big meal, a small meal. There's no order of events that you have to consume food in to dial in some optimal, perfect way in which you extract the energy and build a muscle. It's, again, it all comes back to what I call this holy grail, this metabolic flexibility. If you built the flexibility, now you have the leeway to play around in the margins and then come back. And for me, because I like to eat and I don't like being so dogmatic on my diet, I want to be able to play in the margins. I want to be able to go to Europe and have pasta and pizza, not every day, but certainly more than once in a while, shall we say, right?
Yeah.
But knowing that I've done the work and knowing that as long as I don't use that, having gone outside the margins for a length of time, as long as I don't do it for weeks on end, I'll come back to center. I'll come back to this metabolically flexible person who can, I suppose if you eat that cheesecake, you could say, if I'm metabolically flexible, all right, tomorrow's a leg day because I ate the cheesecake, I loaded my glycogen, I'm gonna take advantage of my carbo loading that I did inadvertently because I had an extra shot of tequila or whatever, and now tomorrow will be a leg day. You can have fun with this. You can play around with it rather than have it be this dogmatic thing that in the event that you stray, you beat yourself up.
I'm so happy you're talking about this because I think that what goes along with metabolic flexibility is this cognitive flexibility as well. This ability, to use your words, to play in the margins. Because, I was talking to a friend recently. She just launched a book and we were texting about how busy she was and how overwhelming it was and how she hasn't slept and all this. And I said, but what is the point of always being always in bed at 9 o'clock? Like if you're always making these health deposits into your health bank account, let's say, sometimes you want to make a withdrawal, right? Sometimes you want to not sleep because you're launching a book, or maybe you don't need to launch a book to understand this example, but to go to Italy and have pasta and pizza, like it's fine to play in the margins, as you said. And also to, I often will say, like, the stress and the shame and the guilt and then the cortisol, like then the sort of stress hormones that follow that are probably more damaging than the extra slice of cheesecake or the shot of tequila or whatever it was, because that lasts for days. I sort of see people beating themselves up for days on end.